Hi, I'm Dave. Once again, Street Level America. With me is Dr. Douglas Young. Doug, thanks for being with us. You go by Doug or Douglas?
Douglas.
Douglas, thank you for being with us on Street Level America. Today in Gainesville, you had an interesting talk as we compared culture and life in China with life in the United States. Now, I know I love America. You can tell from the shirt I'm wearing that I love America.
Cheers.
But there are some things as we just take a look at society,
Right.
crime, graffiti, pornography, drug addiction. Now, in China, they do, quite frankly, a better job in culture of dealing with those issues because the society is so government restricted. Now, that cuts both ways. So, give us kind of the 30,000-foot view as we compare the culture in China compared to the United States in culture, positives, and the negatives.
I think that maybe the biggest cultural advantage China has over America is regarding the family. Chinese families are far more intact than ours. There is a very low divorce rate in China compared with ours, extremely low illegitimate birth rate there compared with ours. And in China, the emphasis is far more on what's best for the group, for the family as a whole, for the community, for the neighborhood. And people in China feel a great personal responsibility to never let down their parents, their siblings, their children, their entire extended family, neighborhood, community, and ultimately nation. So there's, I think, another cultural advantage that the Chinese have over us is the Chinese are, in many respects, much more united. For example, if you and I were Chinese and we're in any Chinese city, we don't know each other from Adam, and you're lost in town, and you see me, you would just say, "Oh, hey, big brother, how do I get to Golden Corral?" And I say, "Oh, little brother, you just go down this street and turn left." There's a real sense of camaraderie, of esprit de corps. We're all brother and sister Chinese. You don't have this American emphasis on, oh, you're of this race, or you're of this sex, or you're of this sexual orientation, or you're of this cultural group, et cetera, et cetera. There's much more emphasis on unity, what's best for everybody as a whole.
Now, as we take a look at China, much more emphasis on the family,
Yes.
but also a lot more government restrictions. And for example, capital crimes in China, rape, assault are a capital crime in China. Drug abuse, drug dealing is a capital crime in China. So they have no drug dealers in China because they're dead. They've killed them.
You got to be mighty brave to be a Chinese drug dealer.
So on the positive side, you do have a cleaner culture. You have a stronger family unit, but they also do not have the freedoms we have in America. As we look at the benefits and the cons, still, hey, I love America and I love the freedoms we have, but we need to do a better job of rebuilding the family unit, and we need to do a better job of getting a handle on the work ethic, for example, and dealing with the drug crisis. And as you mentioned in your talk today in Gainesville, the homeless issue. There are no homeless in China. We in America need to do a better job of trying to find how to reach the benefits that China has with the family unit and dealing with these issues without destroying our individual freedoms and liberties.
Right. China really has made great progress in a number of important areas of life, particularly urban life. However, my view is that we don't have to adopt the authoritarian means that China does to achieve the same good results. For example, regarding crime, yes, China has, according to my research, 45 capital crimes. I mean, assault can get you executed, robbery, possession of a handgun. In my view, we don't have to go remotely that far. I mean, I'm against gun control, but if we simply enforce the laws that we already have on the books against assault, robbery, you know, people in illegal possession of guns, people with a criminal record, that kind of thing. If we simply enforce the laws that we have, and if we really punished people by putting them in jail for several years for committing serious crimes, I think our crime rate would lower dramatically as well. I mean, we now have a situation where so many George Soros funded Democratic district attorneys in big cities like in San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, and elsewhere, they simply have not prosecuted even violent criminals. Even people arrested for serious violent crimes are let out on bail the same day. I think that that is just outrageous. And so it should not shock us at all that we have seen a big uptick in crime in this country in the last few years since we've had a record number of district attorneys who simply are refusing to prosecute most criminals.
And so we need to do a better job of prosecuting those criminals. As we look at how does the average Chinese feel about America? Now, we here in America feel like, hey, this is America. Freedom is the utmost, it's the gold standard. We enjoy the freedoms, the Constitution, First Amendment, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we are born, bred, that's what we live for. Right. In some case, die for. But what does the average Chinese think about the American life as they compare it with theirs? Do they really understand the American way, and what is their perception of the American way?
The Chinese, whom I have encountered, love the American people, and they love America's pop culture, our movies, music, products. Not too many years ago, the Chinese were so infatuated with all things American that if they would buy a pair of Ray-Ban or some other American-made sunglasses, they would leave the Made in America tag hanging from it. So I'm stopped on the streets of major Chinese cities and in small towns by strangers who don't know me any more than they know Adam, and they'll want to be photographed with the American. And I'll be asked when I'm on the streets of cities in China, where are you from? And I'll say American. They'll give me a thumbs up. Or one Chinese this last time said, "Oh, America, fantastic." So most of the Chinese, they're well aware that the news they're getting from their news media is communist propaganda. As my sweet Cheyenne's mother, who's 90, who's lived her whole life in China, she says, "Oh, all the news from America is bad," because that's what the government wants people to know. But the Chinese people are better aware than anyone that what qualifies as news for them is propaganda. And they make a big distinction between a nation's people and its government. So the Chinese people adore the American people. Now, they don't like America's government because they think that America's government is interfering in Chinese internal affairs regarding Taiwan, which they regard as theirs. They don't like the American government for, in their opinion, interfering in Hong Kong matters because they say Hong Kong is ours. What would you Americans say if we dared to interfere with matters in Florida or Hawaii or some American state or city? They don't like American foreign policy. They think that our national government is too prone to butt its nose in the internal affairs of other nations as well. They think that our government is too warmongering, like in Afghanistan, like in Iraq, like in Syria, and Libya, and other countries where we have interfered politically, militarily, and with our intelligence agencies. So they're not wild about some of our trade policies. They certainly don't like President Trump threatening tariffs on their goods. But again, the Chinese people make a huge distinction between the American people and the government. And I hope that the American people can make a similar distinction between the Chinese people and the Chinese government. I think that we should remember that not one Chinese got to vote in a national free and fair election. The Chinese people didn't get to elect Xi Jinping, their leader, any more than we did. And also, I hope that we as Americans can keep in mind that we don't like uh, every other American president. I mean, we're a nation that's pretty evenly divided between the Democratic and Republican parties. And what do the Republicans think of President Joe Biden? What do the Democrats think of President Donald Trump? So, for people who are Republican, uh, do they feel like do they believe that the Biden government has represented them well here and around the world the last 4 years? Uh, do most Democrats think that President Trump's administration from 2017 to 2021, did most Democrats think that he represented them well? So I hope that we can, like the Chinese, work harder at trying to distinguish the citizens of a nation from its government, because they may and generally are quite different.
So earlier you mentioned that Chinese are infatuated with Americans. The American people, they like the American culture, the Ray-Ban sunglasses, and so on and so forth. So, do they just like the things, the bling, the equipment, all the stereos, all the cars, the life, the bling of American society, or do they like maybe being freer than they are in a communist society, or is it a combination?
I think it's both. The NBA is hugely popular in China. I remember in 2013, I was in Qining, which is in north central western China, and there were big posters advertising televised NBA basketball games in north central western China. So I think they do love our sense of freedom, how lively Americans are. The Americans, in my experience and observation, are more exuberant, kind of loud culture, and that's fascinating to a more reserved Confucian society like China. And so it's a combination. They are impressed with our freedom, our creativity, our joie de vivre, if you will. Although I'm using a French term.
What is that?
Joy of life. But they also really admire our technology. They do. I think some of them envy our standard of living. But most of the Chinese believe that they are living in the golden age of China, because most Chinese today are financially, materially, economically far, far better off now than they've ever been in 5,000 years of Chinese history. They compare themselves not so much to us, but to their past.
There are some aspects of American culture, like the American Old West, that I think they're really attractive to Chinese.
Yes, that's right. I remember years ago, I lectured to a group of Chinese about American culture, and I was talking about how the genre of Western movies, cowboys and Indians Western movies in this country, really has been extremely important to American pop culture. And the Chinese are fascinated by that. Like other cultures around the world, a lot of Europeans love American Western movies as well. But the Chinese, they've really been quite taken with not just Western American movies, but all kinds of different genres of American movies. And the Chinese film industry has come a long way this century. I mean, the Chinese are producing, I think, a lot more films, a lot more high-tech films. And most of the Chinese in the cities, they've got their iPhones and they're computer savvy. And the fact is that way more Chinese speak English than Americans. And so, particularly among the younger, more educated urban Chinese in the eastern part of China, in big cities like Shanghai and Beijing, Nanjing, Guangzhou, they are quite savvy regarding the web and contemporary developments in American pop culture. And even though Facebook is outlawed in China, I don't think it's too expensive for Chinese to buy over-the-wall software so that they can access Facebook, they can access other websites that might be outlawed for political reasons in China. And the Chinese government today is really no longer totalitarian, it's authoritarian. It's a dictatorship, to be sure. But unless Chinese are criticizing the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, they're probably not going to be prosecuted for getting onto Facebook or accessing other Western sites that are sort of verboten in China. When I've been in China, I would never do this on any of my Sweet Cheyenne's family's computers or laptops, but like on a hotel lobby laptop or computer, I've accessed websites that I knew the Chinese government wouldn't like, and there was never a problem.
If America does go to war with China over the issue of Taiwan or Hong Kong, Taiwan, that's the hot button issue right now. What do you think the Chinese people would think of that? What would there be their reaction in America when we have American citizens who don't believe in the government's choice to go to war? For example, I'll give it Vietnam, the Vietnam War. There's a lot of pushback in the public about the Vietnam War. If China went to war with America over Taiwan, what would be the citizens of China response? Any ideas?
Oh, I don't have any doubt the Chinese reaction would be virtually unanimous in favor of Beijing. There would be almost complete unity because the Chinese believe, even Chinese who don't like the Chinese Communist government, they believe that Taiwan is absolutely part of China. And Taiwan had long been part of China long before General Chiang Kai-shek took the Nationalist Army in 1949 to Taiwan to separate it from the rest of China. The Chinese believe that Taiwan is every bit as much a part of China as Florida or California or Hawaii are parts of the U.S. And the Chinese would say, what did you Americans do when 11 of your southern states dared to secede in 1861? And what would you do today if Hawaii dared to try to secede, or Texas, or Mississippi? The Chinese say, look, the people on Taiwan were Chinese long before 1949. They are still Chinese nationally, ethnically, racially, culturally, linguistically, historically, and America has no more right to interfere regarding Taiwan than China has to interfere in Hawaii or Washington State or Oregon or Alaska or any other American state. Whether that's right or wrong, that is their view.
Next question, I'll ask it anyway. We can edit it out, or you can opt not to answer if you'd like. If China and America go to war, who do you think would win? Now we're looking at the Chinese Navy really building up, and hopefully, pray to God this never happens. It would be terrible.
It would, and first of all, I don't think we're going to go to war at all. I'm not worried in the slightest about that because neither country can afford to go to war, especially against the other, because our economies are way too tightly intertwined. We depend on each other too much for investments, exports, financially. We're too dependent on them to buy treasury bonds, to buy our debt.
Make our stuff.
Right, and they're too dependent on us to pay them back.
Buyers to pay money for the stuff they're making for us.
Right, we need each other way too much. So I don't think that we're going to go to war against each other. If we did, if it was an all-out war and it went nuclear, I mean, we have many times more nuclear weapons than they do. And even if it remained strictly conventional, I still think we would have the upper hand. You mentioned the Navy. Yes, the Chinese have, as they've gotten in recent decades, far more prosperous than ever before since they've adopted American capitalism to a greater extent than ever. They do have a lot more ships than they used to. But the fact is, our Navy is still much stronger. For example, if you hear some flack for the military-industrial complex over here, some defense company flag, saying, "Oh, the Chinese now have 2 whole aircraft carriers." Well, yeah, 2, and one of them is an old Soviet aircraft carrier that the Russians didn't want anymore. You know how many aircraft carriers we have? 11, and we're building several more. So we are still much stronger than they are, much more high tech, and I do not believe, first of all, that we would go to war over Taiwan. That's way too far away. I don't think the American people, if there was any kind of a risk of a nuclear war, and the Chinese absolutely, I think, would threaten it if they thought that we were in serious danger of preventing them from taking Taiwan. I think the Chinese would threaten nukes, and I don't think the American people would stand for that. I mean, the very idea of risking San Francisco or New York City or Washington for Taipei, I just don't think the American people would put up with it.
I also want to caveat that with Donald Trump is very much anti-war as much as possible, and I'm sure the author of Let's Do the Deal would figure out some other way militarily, diplomatically and economically, trade negotiations. The guy has the art of the deal, and I'm sure he would do everything possible to avoid a war. And based on his comments he's made about the Russia-Ukraine war. Right. So give us your bona fides. You're a professor. What do you do?
I'm a University of North Georgia, Gainesville political science professor emeritus. I taught political science and history, mostly political science, for 21 and a half years on what's now the UNG Gainesville campus. Before that, it was Gainesville State College. Before that, I was a political science and history professor at Gordon College in Barnesville, Georgia. So I was an academic for a little over a third of a century. And since then, I've been a full-time author. I've got 2 novels out. This is my first novel, Deep in the Forest. It's a lot of fun. Last I checked, it had 79 Amazon reviews, and they're all raves. It has a 4.9 reader rating. Due South is my second novel. It's another light comedy drama. And I checked recently, and it had, I think, 32 reviews, all raves, another 4.9 overall reader rating. And my latest book, which came out a little under a year ago, is my first collection of essays, 65 political essays, 2 on China, most about American political issues. And it also has a 4.9 rating on Amazon. And they're all a lot of fun, and I loved writing them. And I've got a 4th book coming out within the next couple of months called Not Just Political. It's another collection of essays, but they're mostly non-political, although there is one on China.
Dr. Douglas Young, thank you for talking to us on Street Level America.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
God bless you.
You too.
Street Level America, I'm Dave Adams in Gainesville, Georgia, and hopefully coming to your town.